All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be with you today. And we've got with us the thought leader, Arlen Grossman. Arlen, I don't see your name up there. I was struggling, got on a little bit late, a lot of stories to try to put in the slide deck, but I want to have your name there. We'll get it for you. How you doing, though, today? And it's great to see you.
Thank you, Hal. It's good to see you, too. It's a whole new world right now. It feels to me it's the MAGA world. And we're going to have, a great many changes, and the country will certainly change. The world, I think, is going to change a lot, and it's going to be a very eventful next few years. I don't know where it's going to end up, but it's going to be pretty strong changes coming up.
Well, you were pretty upset. I mean, I was upset. I've been upset basically since Bernie lost to Hillary. So I think it was whatever primary kind of knocked him out in 2016. Probably it was South Carolina when I thought the writing was on the wall. But I've been upset since then. But you've held out, I guess, a little, or maybe I'm wrong, some optimism that Kamala could make things a little better going forward. So have you given up hope or forever? I mean, where do you see us going in the next 4 years and then down the road past then?
Yeah, I started to get kind of depressed and felt bad about 2 weeks before the election because I could see that the country was changing, that the Democrats were not moving up in the polls, and that we could have a rout, and indeed we did. So it didn't surprise me completely, although I really didn't see it quite as bad as it turned out to be. But, I was just thinking a few minutes ago that there's actually a good part of the fact that Trump and his people won. There's actually a good side, and that is that it will force the Democratic Party to change, to look at themselves, to examine, their beliefs, their strategies, everything. And, if they could figure out a better way than, for the party than what they've done so far, then that could be actually a benefit.
Do you think that's going to happen? I mean, I've heard this from I think that was even one of the op-eds I read in the New York Times. Maybe it was Washington Post. I'm not even sure where, but the argument was this is better for the party because it will force them to change and grow rather than rest on their laurels. But I mean, do you really think that will happen? Do you think they actually will institute the kind of changes that are necessary for them to, be an effective and popular party? And if so, what will those changes look like, Arlen?
That's really hard to say, how we don't know what's going to happen. The Democrats, they really need to do something to make some big changes, or whether they have the motivation, the drive, the intelligence, the right people. I don't know for sure, but clearly they were routed. The Trump people, the MAGA people said, we've got a better way. And the American people didn't like the way the Democrats were running the country. So they chose Trump and the Republicans. And so the Democrats, have to see that they were routed and they need to do something. Now, again, I don't know how much they'll change or what they'll do, but it will be necessary.
All right, well, we're going to get into what changes are necessary, what various pundits and folks that you respect, that I respect, some you respect more than I do. I don't think any I respect more than you do that we're going to, well, I don't know. There's a few there. Maureen Dowd, I don't know what your thoughts are on her. I thought she had some interesting ideas, but we'll lead off our first pundit when we get into the post-mortem will be Thom Hartmann. I know you have great respect for Tom, but before that, I always center Gaza. The U.S. election did not change the horror of the Middle East, the horror that Israel is visiting upon its neighbors. And we see this story real quick. We'll get into I don't have an current death count. That would be current as of early this morning. But the Middle East Monitor reporting this morning, actually, or this afternoon there in Gaza. This is about a woman. I think she had 7 kids. Gaza mother struggling to feed children, says only death can end their suffering. And then there's an image there, and you can see, I don't think those are her children necessarily, but the hunger is just so cruel, Arlen. And these children are malnourished, and some are starving, and they are also, and parents and seniors are all without the strength to fight off diseases. Often hunger doesn't kill you, but it may leave you vulnerable. So this is just terrible. This is just so wrong, and I'm not going to stop talking about it. Just give you the number right here from the Turkish group there, Anadolu Ajansi. This is from Saturday midnight, or Sunday, I guess, first thing Sunday morning in Gaza. They had 51 dead, and the death toll there over 43,600. And then I'll give you the final count there that I have, 43,603 as of Saturday into Sunday. Arlen, any comments you want to make on this situation, and any optimism or even greater pessimism you may have at this point?
Probably greater pessimism. I think the people who live in Gaza, the Palestinians, are in for a rough time ahead. I don't know who's going to really be advocating for them. Joe Biden won't be. I don't think Kamala Harris will be. Trump, I don't think is, that concerned about the civilians. And so we don't know what they're going to do and, what their solution is going to be. But I think as of now, if I was living in Gaza now, if I was a Palestinian, I'd be really, really afraid that this is going to continue on and on and on.
Do you see now there's going to be some activities in the next few days, because Biden announced 29 days ago that if Israel didn't start complying with international law and American law when it comes to allowing aid to the civilian victims of Gaza, if Israel doesn't start allowing that aid in, the U.S. will reconsider its policy of supplying the Israeli military. I don't know how clear I was in that statement. I did my best. Do you think that maybe we'll see a shift during this lame duck period between now and the inauguration of Trump?
I don't know how, but it's, as you know, it's too little, it's too late. This should have been done, this kind of talk should have been happening a long time ago, and it may be past the time where anything could be done. I don't know if, how much power Biden and his administration have in foreign policy right now. If you have, Trump thinking of his own way to do things, and the people coming in are thinking of their ways to do things, and we don't know Trump's relationship with Vladimir Putin and other leaders. So it's very complicated, and I wouldn't guess what Biden will do, if he will really, come through with what he said. I'd be surprised, but I hope he does.
Well, I mean, he does have power. I mean, that's one of the arguments I've heard, and I would just push back a little. This is your hour more than mine. I'm going to really try to give you as much freedom, but I just push back a little. He is still president. He still controls the military. He still has the power of the pen. So there are things Biden and Harris presumably could do, even so far as deploying the U.S. military if they felt it was appropriate. And I would say I say it is, but they can do things. That's really my point. Is that there are solutions that are still available to them, in my opinion.
Well, the only real solution is to say to Netanyahu, no more weapons, no more money until you, have a reasonable course of action where, civilians are not killed and humanitarian aid is open, and, all those kind of things. But, like I say, it's too little too late. Biden should have done this so much long ago, and Kamala Harris should have talked about this long ago, and she may have done better. But it's absolutely necessary to figure out a way to get Netanyahu under control and his right-wing government. Because if we don't, the wars will expand. We'll go into Iran and all kinds of, other countries, and it could get very bloody, and there could be a lot of war.
I mean, it's really bad now, but as you say, it could get worse. It's hard. Well, for the people in Palestine right now to say it will get worse, I think is cruel, because they're starving, they're being bombed, they're seeing their children getting shot. But the war, but it could get worse in a geopolitical sense, in that, Israel is expanding its operations into Lebanon. It's sending leaflets, dropping leaflets on people, telling them they have to evacuate north. If they head south, they'll be shot. And they're also clearly saber rattling against Iran, which would be terrible if there's some kind of a war there. By the way, 240-242-5646, just looking over the side, trying to make sure I can get that bell ringing when one of you calls. Hopefully you will. Arlen, let's get to the causes, in your opinion, of Harris's defeat. And we're not leaving war. We're not leaving, the support for Israel. I think both of us feel is over the top too much. But let's start with your buddy. I mean, I wouldn't call him mine, but you're a big fan of Tom Hartman's. Did you meet him? He was in Monterey. We brought him there back in the old KRX8 days. I bet you saw him, right? He was pretty good, I thought, actually.
Yeah, the Pilgrim's Way and saw him, and of course, very impressed. And yeah, I don't think there's anybody that's more knowledgeable or intelligent than Tom Hartman. He just makes the most sense to me, at least. One last thing about the Gaza situation. I think what we have to also deal with is that Donald Trump does not have a whole lot of empathy and compassion for civilians there. So I don't think that's going to be a big factor in his thinking. He's going to figure out, how can I benefit from all this? And so we'll just have to wait and see. Now, as far as the reason the Democrat, yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Why did you stop?
I'm going back to the original question about why the Democrats lost. And there's all kinds of reasons being given by all sorts of people. I think that Tom Hartman and Bernie Sanders understand the real problem. And I'll tell you what I think the real problem is. If you remember back in 2010, Barack Obama gave a State of the Union address in which he mentioned Citizens United and how awful that will be for our political system. And, Judge Alito said, no, that's not right. But I think
he mouthed "you lie," right? We could see him on TV saying "you lie" to Obama.
Yeah, but Obama was right, and I think it's even worse than anybody could have thought at that time, because right now, well, first of all, the Supreme Court has been awful, as we know, and they've been working toward this kind of thing for a long time with Buckley decision and giving corporations more power to spend money. And until we got to the point that right now there really is no check or balance on contributions from rich people right now. And for that reason, I think that's the biggest reason that Trump and the MAGA people did as well as they did, is because, let me put it this way. It's because of the fact that there was, there were very powerful people, the Elon Musks of the world, other billionaires were putting tremendous amounts of money into the election and promoting all kinds of hate and lies, conspiracy theories, misinformation, and so on. And obviously it affected, I think, the voters, and they believed a lot of that kind of thing. And I think that's one factor that was a big one, maybe the biggest of all, I think.
Well, let me just push back a little bit. And by the way, folks who heard that phone ring, that was a user error, meaning me sending that out there. Maybe we'll delete it. I don't know if it's worth the trouble of getting it out of there. But folks who heard a phone ring, that's what that was. Let me push back a little. I agree with you, Arlen, that Citizens United has been a terrible problem. But I would posit that the bigger negative has been that it's pushed the Democrats to become even more corporate, that they have chased the Republicans to the right, at least when it comes to economic policies and neoliberalism, and actually neoconservatism as well, so that on the most important issues, war, economics, the parties are pretty similar in many ways. And I would say that's the bigger issue. It's not so much that it helps Donald Trump get elected. What it did is it resulted in a system where there's virtually in my opinion anyway, little or no difference in the implications for most Americans when it comes to who they elect.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right about the Democratic Party. And that's why I don't criticize the Democrats maybe as much as other people do, because I don't know that they really had a choice. By the time the Supreme Court ruled that, money is unlimited and corporations and rich people could do whatever they wanted to do, the Democrats had a choice of ignoring that or trying to get some of that big money. And they chose to go the route of getting the big money, and they tried to get their own millionaires, billionaires, and millionaires and corporations. But ultimately, the Republicans could get more.
Well, I don't know that they got more. It looks like the Democrats raised more money, I believe. Now, it may be that because of, what the pushback has been, well, Musk is so rich and he has Twitter that he's able to kind of counterbalance Harris's or even overbalance against Harris's billionaires. But she, as far as I know, you may have different numbers, but I understand she actually did raise more and spend more than he did.
I don't know if I accept that, Hal. I think we really don't know because the way the laws are written, there's so much, dark money everywhere. Nobody really knows for sure who's giving what and how much and to whom. And, it's just totally out of control. I mean, remember those days, maybe 15 years ago, when we talked about campaign finance reform and how we don't want to give the rich people all the power. We want the average voter to have power. That's totally gone. There was, McCain-Feingold and all that just swept away. So now we have a situation where there is no thought of, that the fact that Elon Musk could give billions or millions of dollars, hundreds of millions if he wants to, and he's going to get all kinds of advantages. He's going to be, by the time, Trump's administration is done, I think Elon Musk is going to have more money than probably almost the rest of the world combined. I mean, he knows how to make money. He knows how to use his influence, and he's going to, he's going to tell Trump in many ways what Trump should be doing. So, yeah, I just think that's the biggest of all. The fact that, the money, the donations are just totally unregulated. And, and that's
it's very scary. It's no question. It's clearly fascistic. It's terrifying, really. I'm with you there, Arlen. I don't think there's any dispute. So the big money, the shadow money, is harming harming our politics greatly. Let's get to now. We talk about Hartman. So I saw this poll. It says 2 hours ago, but that was 2 hours ago, Friday. Saw this poll that Tom put up. Now, to be very fair, this is not Tom's view. This is the views of his viewers, his watchers. But he has to be responsible at least for the poll because these were the options he gave his audience. And you can see the two blue checks. Those are my answers. I don't think he gave enough. I would have, he could have said neoliberalism or corporatism or militarism or something of that sort. I would have been more, I would have said, yeah, those are the reasons. But do you think this is a fair poll, or does this cover, in your opinion, the most important factors that might have caused Harris to lose, or how do you respond to this particular poll that Tom put up?
Well, first of all, I don't pay much attention to it because Tom Hartman has a select audience and they have their own views, and it's going to be different than the views of the average.
Well, you're part of that audience. You're one of his audience, though. So this would be, people that apparently also recognize his wisdom and his perspicacity.
Well, again, it's not what you call a scientific poll. And, we could, I'm sure there's a lot that's said there that could be useful, but I don't put much.
Can you read it from where you're sit? Can you see what he said?
Not exactly.
Okay, let me go through it then, because you should be able to see it, but maybe it's too small. So the four choices for the question, why did Harris lose the 2024 election for Tom's viewers? America is a racist country that hates women. 65% said that's the answer. Courting Republican voters with Liz Cheney, 9%. I checked that. Supporting genocide against Palestine, I checked that. Foreign interference from Russia, Israel, and others, 16%. So the great majority said it's racism and sexism. A small second, coming in second by a narrow margin, is foreign interference. So any thoughts on those options?
What was the number on supporting genocide against Palestine?
That was 11%, and 9% was the Liz Cheney answer.
I see. Well, the fact that 65% felt that America is a racist country that hates women is not very helpful. So, that's interesting, and it may be true. I don't know, but although I doubt it's that bad, but it's not going to really help the Democrats. So the Democrats have to really think about moving away from what they've been doing and, relying on the big corporations, and start thinking about what can they do to get working people on their side. What can they do to get union members on their side? What can they do to become what they used to be, which is the party of the working class, and helping those who are less fortunate than others. So that's the direction I think they need to go. I don't know if they'll be able to, or how much they'll be able to do that, but and how can they do it when the Republicans have so much money, and these billionaires are so much in power on his side? It's going to be a tough thing to do. But the Democrats definitely have to start thinking of changing into what they used to be, which is the party of the working class and labor.
Well, the all that money in politics, I think, has also created an electorate that's incredibly cynical, that doesn't believe either party is on its side, that doesn't believe either party cares about it in the least. And I think with good reason. And Trump is somewhat spectacular, and he does serve up certain villains, which the Democrats don't do, or at least, they don't. I mean, the Democrats don't point fingers. Trump does. He says it's immigrants. He says it's he goes back and forth on who to blame, but he does provide some villains, and that is satisfying to people who are suffering. I think the Democrats need to provide villains. I want to play this video. This is also Hartman, because I know you're a big fan, but this really, and I wonder if you have thoughts, because you're, whether this is not him, by the way, speaking. This is him quoting someone from The Nation, and then we'll get his response. So I want to be very fair to Tom, but also play his response to Elie Mystal's column in The Nation.
Elie Mystal writes, "We had a chance to stand united against fascism, authoritarianism, racism, and bigotry, but we did not. We had a chance to create a better world for not just ourselves, but for our sisters and brothers in at least some of the communities most vulnerable to unchecked white rule, but we did not. We had a chance to pass down a better, safer, and cleaner world to our children, but we did not. Instead, we chose Trump, Vance, and a few white South African billionaires who know a thing about instituting apartheid. We, as a nation, have proven ourselves to be a fetid, violent people, and we deserve a leader who embodies the worst of us," he wrote.
All right, so that's, Hartman reading from The Nation, which is supposed to be super progressive. I don't find that to be progressive. And you already said you don't think that's helpful at all, what Mystal said.
Well, one thing we have to also consider is that this election, more than any other, had more misinformation, more lies, more hate, more conspiracy theories. You had other countries getting involved in promoting, ideas to the American people. And we're just not getting an objective view of the world anymore. We're getting people who are trying to promote something, who are trying to convince people of things, but it's not really, we're not getting what we used to have, which is more of a consensus and a feeling that, hey, there, the crazies and the hate stuff, it doesn't belong anywhere. here.
You're watching Halitics. Arlen Grossman, the thought leader, is with us. Great to have him with us. He blogs at thebigpicturereport.com, and his latest post is actually Thom Hartmann's post-mortem that I saw anyway, unless you put something up very recently, meaning since I think this morning. That's what's there. So if you want to read what Thom has to say, and it's a more detailed, and I think it's a little bit, I don't want to say I'm being unfair to him by choosing some of what he's put on his show, but he does a lot. He puts a lot up there, and I picked a few clips that struck me, not necessarily that are totally fair to him. But let me play for you his response to Mistel. I don't know, have you seen these, by the way, Arlen, or maybe you haven't? They are from Thom last week. So apparently this is new to... You saw some of this. You did. Okay, let me just play this real quick then.
I get that. I also think that blaming ourselves is not particularly useful.
I'm going to just stop it right there, because one thing that really pissed me off about what Mistel said, not what Thom's saying, and this is not to be harsh on Thom at all, but what pissed me off about what Mistel said that I wish Thom would have pointed out is that Mistel says, we deserve, it's our fault. But what he's really saying is, it's your fault. He's saying it's the fault of the Trump voters. He's not taking any ownership. The way he describes the election is sweetness and light and kindliness and generosity and goodness is all Kamala, and darkness and evil and fetid swamps is Trump. Well, that's not saying it's our fault. He's saying it's your fault, you dumbasses, for voting for Trump. And again, just like you said, I not only do I think it's not helpful, if your goal is to try to persuade people to vote for candidates that you prefer, he's doing just the opposite.
Well, let's face it, Hal, there are really no heroes in this. I mean, you look at what happened. There's no heroes in the Democratic Party. You know, Joe Biden did some terrible things. Kamala Harris didn't do things properly. The Democratic Party didn't do the right things. And on the other side, you know, the MAGA people were just all about lies and hate and disruption and, you know, just craziness. I mean, Trump was like, sounded like he was trying to throw the election and lose, the way he was talking toward the end about, you know, shooting Liz Cheney and that, you know, the stuff about Puerto Rico being a, you know, garbage dump and so on. So there are no heroes in this. And as to who's going to come up with the right answers, we don't know yet. Again, I think the biggest thing is we got to get money out of politics. I don't know if that's possible, but we certainly should move in that direction, or try at least over time. And also we got to worry about things like climate change, availability of AR-47s and assault weapons, and women's rights. I mean, there's so many things that are not going to get done or improved. So, you know, it's hard to say what's going to happen in the future. You know, it'll play itself out and we'll find out, but we don't really know for sure what's going to happen in the next few months.
All right, let's play the rest of what Thom had to say. He's going to assign responsibility, in his view, for what happened.
Honestly, do not think that Donald Trump, the Trump presidency and Donald Trump and all of his positions and whatnot, they actually represent the majority of Americans. I refuse to believe that. I think Americans got snookered. I think billions of dollars of dark money pouring into radio and television ads, and billions of dollars in you know, billionaire media. The most watched television channel this last year in the country was Fox. And
I think he must mean the most watched news station was Fox, not television.
Well, they get a big audience.
Yeah, no, they're number one, although there were certainly have been times, there have been times when Rachel Maddow actually gets more viewers than Fox. But yeah, it's definitely Fox. But is that because of Citizens United or right-wing money, or is that just because for whatever reason? I mean, very few people, in the end, less than 1% of the population is ever watching Fox News. Their biggest audience used to be for Tucker Carlson. They got over 3 million sometimes for him. That's not even 1% of the population, Arlen. So I don't know how satisfying an answer this is, if you ask me.
Well, yeah, Fox News is one thing, but the fact is there's so many copycats to Fox News, so many other right-wing radio stations that the right-wing, billionaires have poured money into. There's like, hundreds of hate radio stations all across the country. There's the Sinclair newspaper group distorts the news. I mean, there's so much, Fox News is only one part of it. They've pretty much developed a large, corporation that's pretty much taken over the media and our ideas, and it's hurting.
Yeah, no, that's a very fair point. Absolutely. So that's right. So let me play a little more from Tom here. There isn't even that much more, but we'll get what we can in for you. Here we go.
And they just perpetually lie. I mean, they've admitted it. They paid us a $700 million fine for lying.
All right. So, in a way, he's right. But on the other hand, he's ignoring the ways that the liberal media, the liberal elites misrepresent and present stories in a fashion that isn't honest. So, I have problems with that, but I don't think he's totally wrong either. How do we move past it, regardless of whether, the right wing is that much worse and how big a factor that specifically was? How do we get to a place where maybe we have a more responsible media, Arlen?
Well, I think one thing is just to wait and see what happens with the economy. I think with all the tax breaks that Trump wants to give out and all the favors he wants to give to his friends, his billionaire friends and all that, I think we might just get a recession. In fact, Tom points out something pretty interesting, I think. He says that ever since Richard Nixon, every single Republican president has got us into a bad recession. And on the other side of the coin, the Democratic Party, no Democratic presidents have had a large recession when they've been in office. So, I think that's something we have to, factor in. I think the economy could slide, really, with all the ideas that Trump and his people have. I think the economy is, kind of in a bad shape and could get a lot worse.
Well, the economy isn't doing well for anyone who's not in the top, let's say 10%. I mean, I won't say top 1%, but if you're not already doing okay, you're probably not doing very well because inflation is very high and wages have not kept pace. This is a piece, Arlen, and again, jump in if I miss something or you want to add something that I haven't said. This is an article. This actually is from it's from the New York Times. You sent it to me. And also, let me just again reiterate, as I always do, please call in if you want to join the conversation. I know Arlen really likes to get calls. I do too, although not as much when Arlen's on because I like talking to Arlen. But, I know there's somebody who just sort of, I don't know if they dropped me completely or they were pretty irritated by some stuff I posted. So, and that's a friend of yours, Arlen. So if you want to call in, friend of Arlen, please do. And you can give him some support, not that he needs it. Okay, this is from Ben Rhodes, interestingly, a former national security advisor, deputy under Obama. I study guys like Trump. There's a reason they keep winning. So I've got some clips from this I took out, but what was your big takeaway from this article, Arlen?
Well, there was a particular paragraph where he kind of summarized almost everything that the other side, the Republicans that Trump did. If I could just read a few sentences, the playbook for transforming a democracy into a soft autocracy was clear. Win power with a populist message against elites, redraw parliamentary districts, change voting laws, harass civil society, pack the courts with judges willing to support power grabs, enrich cronies through corruption, buy up newspapers and television stations, and turn them into right-wing propaganda, use social media to energize supporters, and wrap it up in an us versus them message. Us, the real Russians, or Hungarians or Americans against a rotating cast of them, the migrants, the Muslims, the liberals, the gays, George Soros, and on and on. It's a pretty good summary of what they did, Hal. They did all those things, and those kind of things helped them win. And, I just like the way he put it all down, in one big paragraph.
Would you agree when I would say, if I said to you, Arlen, okay, these are all defensible. You can point to examples of all of this, but it's only half the story. The Democrats gave a lot of these issues to Republicans, A, and B, the Democrats also did some of the exact same things in their campaign for president.
Yeah, the Democrats made a lot of mistakes. And I think one of the biggest of all is trying to tell everybody, hey, the economy's great. Look at the numbers. Look at inflation going down. Look at our gross national product. Look at how unemployment has gone down, and all these wonderful things. But in reality, about 60% of our country is living paycheck to paycheck. So it's not the Democrats did not have it right. People didn't feel that the economy was working for them. And, they would look at the grocery store station and see if inflation, and they blame somebody, so they blame the party in power. So, the Democrats have to really rethink how they, connect with the people and give their message out.
Is it connecting, or is it simply pursuing policies aggressively that lead to better outcomes for poor and working Americans?
Well, they certainly have to change their policies, and no question about it. I mean, they have to really think about what is going to help. They have to really push for unions and making sure unions have a right to form and a right to establish what they want, and then from then on, because in the past, when we've had a lot of union activity, a lot of unions in this country, the middle class has done well, and ever since then, the corporations have pushed back against unions, and things have gone downhill. So we got to start, I think, with that. Getting a higher minimum wage, make it easier for people to form unions. All kinds of things that would help working people, but there's going to be a lot of resistance to that from, the Trump people.
It's very difficult. Look, let me give some excuse that I think are fair for the Democrats. To a degree, they tried to do some of what you said. That you often hear on some of the pro-democratic, progressive podcasts, more pro-Democrat than I am, that the NLRB, Biden put some pretty good people on the NLRB, and they did make it easier for groups to unionize, for labor to unionize. So there's a positive there, but in the end, it just didn't feel like enough, I think, for most people. And the other challenge that they face, the Democrats, to the extent they want to move to the left on economics, they want to be more populist. The other challenge is the courts are so clearly stacked against them and will be consistently, like, for example, the debt forgiveness, the student debt forgiveness plan, which was somewhat controversial in working class circles, because working people said, well, I'm not getting anything. I don't have a kid in college. I don't have student loan debt because I never went to college. So this is my tax money going to help working, rich elites who went to college. So I understand that was a problem, but even so, it was still a good policy. It should have been, in my view, married to other policies that would have directly helped other working people, non-college grads, but regardless, or non-college attendees. Regardless, the policy would have probably proved popular, but the courts largely gutted it. So these are real structural problems Democrats face. Do you have any thoughts on how they can maybe push back against those structural problems?
Pushing back against the court would be really, really difficult, because Donald Trump will be in charge of nominating judges and adding people to the Supreme Court who, not that they don't have enough already. And also the Democrats, they did, make some moves to help, unions. Biden was on a picket line. That was something special, but it's not nearly enough. And it's going to be there's going to be so much pushback now from the other side if workers try to get their things passed, and you got corporations that are going to say, well, wait a minute, we want to make sure we get our share. So whatever the Democrats try to do, they don't have the power to make those kind of things better for working people at this point.
Let's go to Maureen Dowd. She's always interesting, intriguing. I often disagree with her, but both, I think you and I were certainly captivated, not necessarily 100% agreement with, but captivated by this column here, Democrats and the Case of Mistaken Identity Politics. So she seems to believe, and correct me if you have a different take, but her view is that it was more, again, messaging. It wasn't really, she does throw a nod to populist economics, which the Democrats didn't practice sufficiently, but she seems to believe it's more a messaging issue. Any thoughts? And I just put this up here. Also, just that Democrats appear to be elitist or avatars of elitism, she says.
Yeah, I think the Democrats went way too far toward, trying to make laws that would help minorities and, coming up with things like Latinx and all these things, and making rules that you had to be diverse in your hiring and this and that, and you have to do it a certain way, or else, people have to go to classes or whatever. That stuff hurt. And you have the problems with the transgender. While, transgender is not such a horrible thing, it's the thought that, well, some of those transgender women, who used to be guys, are going to compete in athletics. And of course, that's stupid. It should never happen. If there's a biological advantage for a trans person against women, then that's just not right. So it's things like that. And then, when Democrats were dumb enough to say things like defund the police, that hurt them badly. So a lot of their messaging was just not resonating with the average American, and just not what they're used to.
It also, Arlen, just to throw out, I mean, I think in some ways she's a little bit unfair, but, and we'll get into a little bit more, and some of her comments I just roundly disagree with. I don't think here she's blaming the Democrats, which I find very odd, for the fact, well, you could blame the Democrats for the, quote, anti-Semitism, unquote, in college campuses, since it's a Democratic administration that created the situation where people were righteously indignant and protesting on college campuses against Israel. So I guess there is that argument, but she seems to think that it would have been better if the Democrats had cracked down more, even harder on the protesters. I totally disagree with that from a moral standpoint. I also don't think most Americans really gave that. I don't think that was an issue. I just don't believe that. I do think the Latinx and those issues, I think what they do is they signal. They're a signal to working people, including the people they're trying to appeal to, the Latino, the blacks, that they're clueless. This isn't what we care about. You're saying we want jobs. We want to be able to afford an apartment. We want to be able to take a little vacation. And that was Kamala never talked about those things. She did say, we'll give you a $25,000 bridge loan to buy a house, I suppose, or maybe even I don't think it was ever going to be like a gift or forgive it. But, she talked about little things like that. But again, those were narrowly targeted to certain small groups rather than a holistic solution to a problem that pretty much everyone or most people have. Like, for example, universal health care. Yeah,
fat chance we're going to get that from now on. I mean, it's just isn't.
But she didn't promote it, is what I'm saying, is she didn't talk about a solution and aggressively push for one that I think would have appealed, that does appeal to tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans.
she really tried to moderate herself right from the beginning, denouncing what she had said about fracking and of course the Trump people were put on those commercials where she said, yeah, let's pay for transgender operations for prisoners. I mean, those kind of things just don't make sense to the average American. And, it hurt the Democrats.
Well, here's what Seth Moulton said. You mentioned the trans issue a couple of times, and I'm not particularly sympathetic to those who say we have to, give the trans community. And by the way, many trans activists, as I understand it, they're not saying you have to let trans girls compete against trans. I don't think that's a universal whatsoever in the trans population, but there is certainly a loud subset of trans activists who do take positions that I agree with you do not seem sensible. It is not. I don't think I'm with you, Arlen. I feel very strongly that in a high school biological girl, if she's competing in sports, she should only be competing against other high school biological girls, period. End of story. There are physiological differences between bio males and bio females that being trans, even post-op, whatever you want to say, doesn't change. And even if it did change it, we should still have spaces for biological girls. I just don't think, there's other ways to address. I think there are many trans people who feel the same way. So I think that's true. But when Seth Moulton says Dems spend way too much time trying not to offend anyone, and then he brings up the issue of a biological male, trans female competing in sports, I think that's a poor example. It is true. I don't disagree with him. That is, that's an area where Democrats took the wrong position, both politically and I think policy-wise. But the people I want Democrats to offend are the billionaire class, the militarists. That's who I want them to offend. And this guy Moulton never brings that up once. He never says, no, we've got to have a class war. We've got to declare war on a system that enriches so many, a small number enormously. That's where I want Democrats to go. And he doesn't mention that, certainly.
Yeah, it's going to be really hard to get those things that you're talking about, to go against those kind of rich people and their power and everything, unless we have a recession or a depression. I think that might change things somewhat, and we'll have to watch and see. Another thing about the trans situation, the MAGAs made it sound like kids would go to school and their gender would be changed and they come home with a different gender. I mean, obviously this stuff was really going on.
Oh, they totally they exaggerated, they hyperbolized. But that said, Democrats did hand them the issue to a significant degree. Kamala sort of stayed out of it, but she had answered a survey back in 2020 that hurt her in this case, although apparently the policy was the same as Trump's. Trump said, hey, I don't care. Trump doesn't care. He just uses these issues to the extent that they can benefit him. Here's where Dowd, I think, is really onto something, Arlen. When she embraces these celebrities, it really looks like there's a big club of rich, famous people who are on TV, and I'm not in that club, and I don't like it, and I'm pissed off about it. And I think that's exactly what Dowd is getting at in this particular piece here.
It doesn't sound really true to me. I don't hear people complaining about the fact that Taylor Swift or Oprah Winfrey was speaking out for Kamala. I just don't think that's a big thing, in my opinion.
So you don't think it was helpful to her, but you don't think it necessarily there was a backlash either.
That's the way I feel. Yes.
Okay. Anything else? We've got another couple more stories I want to get to. Here's another one that you cited for me, Arlen. When did liberals become so comfortable with war? To be fair, I was a little surprised because you are one of those, I think, but maybe I'm wrong. Tell us why you wanted to, you felt this article was relevant.
Well, let's face it, Al, our entire history of foreign policy has been a bad one. We know we've been supporting dictators and right-wing governments for decades now. And, we get into wars that we certainly shouldn't get into, like Iraq, Afghanistan, and so on. So, those are, we spend a lot of money and a lot of capital, and a lot of people lose their lives. And, it's just, we have to think of a way so we don't keep doing that. I mean, we got to make sure that we don't think about the fact that corporations, the military-industrial complex, is going to be making lots of money. We have to look at it in a different way.
Well, I agree with you, and I think it did hurt Harris, and Trump plausibly could claim that the Democrats were more the party of war than he was. And he used that, in fact, aggressively against Liz Cheney. And I think it was effective. Clearly, it was effective. It certainly, I think, helped him win the Muslim vote in Michigan. He actually turned the Muslim vote from an 88% Democratic landslide in Michigan to one where he got a plurality, about 45, 46%. I looked at the numbers. Jill Stein, relatively close second, 35, 36%, and then Harris, maybe 15. So clearly, the wars that Democrats have been promoting, using a Republican, Liz Cheney, closely associated with the Iraq War, which killed over 1 million Muslims and very seriously destabilized the Middle East, did not help Harris's campaign.
No, of course not. And it was totally pointless, that war. It accomplished absolutely nothing, and it cost so much in lives and money and everything else. And I think a really big mistake was Biden and Harris not really coming to the defense of the Palestinians in Gaza, not forcing Netanyahu to, make changes in his policy so that he was able to do whatever he wanted to do and still is. So, there's been a lot of mistakes in that direction, and we really do need to think about the whole thing about the military-industrial complex and the wars that we create and how much influence we have all over the world. Maybe we have like bases in every country of the world practically, and maybe that's not such a good idea.
But I'm not trying to, well, I guess I am putting on the spot, or at least pushing back based on some of your previous positions, Arlen. You have, though, supported our support for Ukraine, and that apparently has not been popular, or at least it didn't help. It didn't help Harris in this election either. Where do you parse that out? Do you see that as somewhat different, as the authors do? They do say there's differences between invading Iraq and Afghanistan, defending Ukraine. I guess there's differences. I would agree, but that doesn't mean I support the latter either. But what has this? How do you reflect on your past support for Ukraine, for the Biden-Harris policy towards Ukraine? How do you reflect on that, and with respect to this article?
But yeah, there are certain situations where I think the military is needed and is necessary, and in this case, I think it is, just because Putin, who I think is really dangerous to the world. He's really aggressive and he wants more territory. He invaded Ukraine, for no reason. I mean, no good reason. And he, was against international law, everything else. And so, and we have to, if we allow him to get away with that and to take over Ukraine and start moving into any other countries, then it'll be a major mistake. I don't know how Trump is going to handle this, because I don't know what his relationship with Putin is right now, but I think it'll be interesting to see just how that goes, because the Republicans are somewhat split on whether we should, go and support Ukraine all the way.
You're watching Halitics, by the way, listening to it with Arlen, the thought leader pundit. He blogs at the Don't forget thebigpicturereport.com, not just Big Picture Report, but thebigpicturereport.com. We've got some more minutes left, so if you want to join us, 240-242-5646. I have not looked at I can't always look. I always tell people I'm going to try to keep apprised of your texts in the chat, but I can't always do that. There's too many balls in the air for me to do, so I apologize. Arlen, I'm wondering if you want to address a little bit with respect to the Ukraine war, because again, the authors do share your view that Ukraine is different qualitatively than some of the areas where our military itself is put in the field of battle. But they also note some concerns that voters might legitimately have. And these are them, and I wanted your response. First of all, where war involves a skewed distribution of costs and gains, it tends to incentivize further escalation, which I think is an absolutely irrefutable. Specifically, the gains are going to the military, the weapons manufacturers. They're going to the politicians who are getting either may have invested, right? They invest, they actually buy stock. They own stock in some of those weapons makers like Boeing, Raytheon, and the like. They also get contributions for doing so. So there's a skewed distribution, and that does incentivize further escalation, as they point out. And also just pointing out that the European leaders have argued this is a winnable war without providing any real roadmap for victory. And neither, by the way, has Harris Biden. So any thoughts on that specific critique?
Well, I think there are scores of countries around the world who are in support of our position in defending Ukraine, and were we to drop away from that and stop doing it, I think they will feel really like they've been scammed, and just they'll be very disappointed in our country and really worry about whether the United States is going to be the kind of country it used to be, where we would be supporting democratic governments and trying to do good things, even if we did some bad things along the way too.
Interesting. So those points don't trouble you. They don't cause you to reconsider the possibility that politicians may be acting out of their own self-interest, or that there isn't, there's no clearly defined end game here. That doesn't, because I would have thought, especially the latter would trouble you a little bit, because there doesn't seem to be any real vision for how this war could end, at least not on the Democratic side.
Well, yeah, I think what the Biden and Harris, would like to see would be for, Putin to say, oh, this is just costing too much, I can't go on any farther. But apparently that hasn't worked. And now we've got North Korean troops coming in and helping Russia. It's only going to get worse. And of course, it is inevitable that certain people will make lots of money and have a lot of advantages by how, what kind of weapon systems we use and so forth. That's just going to happen in every war, and it's terrible. I wish it wasn't so, but I think I just think we have to support Ukraine as much as we can and get as much as we can for them. And it may not be what we originally hoped, but at least hopefully they can still have their own government.
All right, real quick, you had mentioned Trump and what his current plans might be for Ukraine. And, he's a very mercurial. We don't, he says he'll do one thing and then maybe he does another. The Washington Post reported this morning that Trump did call Putin, I guess, last night and tell him, don't escalate, don't put more troops in the field. That's not a good idea. So that's apparently what Trump told Putin. So to the extent he did say that, that's a good thing. Hopefully, when he takes office, he will figure out, as he says he can, a way to end the conflict without, as many liberals fret, him giving Russia Ukraine. And just one real point. Go ahead. Yeah, please respond.
I'm just saying, I don't think Putin is afraid of Trump or worried about Trump or really cares that much about what Trump does. He I think he knows how to manipulate Trump. Giving him all kind of praise and helping him whenever he can. So I just don't think that Trump saying, "Hey, stop," your offensive, is going to make much difference.
Aren't you glad, though, Arlen? Because I am. I'll be, I'm not just trying to put you on the spot. I'm trying to ask you questions that are relevant to me. I am pleased that Trump picked up the phone and called Putin. I think we should be having a dialogue with Russia. Putin's one of the most powerful people in the world. He has an enormous army at his disposal. I think this is the right call, rather than what the neolibs have been doing, which is trying to isolate Russia and refuse to talk to them and refuse to negotiate and demand conditions before there's any conversation whatsoever. So I personally think this is a good development.
I'm not complaining about the fact that he called Putin. I think it is good for us to talk to all leaders and come up with all kinds of different ideas that might work and options. So, that's fine. I would like to see Trump do more of that, getting involved in a good way with some of these wars and these countries that are our enemies or so-called enemies. And, what's going to happen with North Korea? I don't know. There's a lot of uncertainty right now, and we're just going to have to wait and see how the next, 6 months to a year play out.
Okay, from the piece that we're talking about here, when did the Democrats become so comfortable with war? We'll move on in a moment, but I was struck by this, what I highlighted there, the sense of righteousness that once infused right-wing war fever. And I assume maybe that's the Vietnam War, although certainly the Democrats support it, but they were tended to be war hawk Democrats, right-wing Democrats like Henry Jackson. But the sense of righteousness that has infused right-wing war fever is increasingly evident, on the left. Do you think that's fair? I mean, certainly we've seen that, I think, in the situation with Ukraine. That is, we have to support Ukraine. I saw a comment by Nick Kristof that we have a moral obligation to the people of Ukraine. Does that trouble you? And maybe not in the Ukraine context, but do you think that's a fair criticism as well, that the left seems to make the argument we have a moral obligation to keep killing people, for want of a different way of phrasing it?
I think a better way to look at it I hope it's the way that they should be looking at it, is that we should try to look out for humanitarian causes, make sure that people are not exploited and killed, and with genocide going on and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things that we have to think about and do. And the Democrats did go a little bit far afield and didn't push back against the pro-war people like they should have on every other position except Ukraine.
All right, we've got Arlen with us. By the way, got some comments in the chat real quick. Ari Magoo, shout out to you, Ari Magoo, and also to E.E. Mogi. Love the names. Can't really, I'm sorry I won't be able to read through them. There's just too many in there, but it's nice to see you guys having a dialogue. That's what Halitics is all about. And I haven't really promoted it, but I've been told to. So yeah, go to the Halitics on Facebook. Some folks prefer to engage on Halitics on social media rather than by watching and maybe commenting on the videos or calling in. And I'm totally good with that. I saw somebody defending me and saying, hey, you should be watching Halitics, and why aren't you? And I'm like, that's great. I wish you would. I want you to, but I'm happy with any place where we have dialogue and we go back and forth. Arlen, one thing I can't stand, I love the fact that you come on this program, and sometimes I ask you a hard question. I think I've been trying very much to be open-ended today. I really want it to be your program to a greater degree than it has in the past. But one thing I can't stand, and I know you never do this, but people who just say, I'm not going to talk to you, Hal. And I get that. I've been getting that from former people I used to organize with. And I would criticize. I'd say, you shouldn't be out there knocking doors for Kamala, or if you are, you need to acknowledge, what she's done wrong, why there's so much disdain for her, why there's so much dislike. And, you can disagree, right? Because you think people should knock doors. But just because I would criticize Harris, that made me someone who was basically an untouchable. No, you're done. You're out of the club. We can't, and that's very, very bad. That's very anti-democratic. There have to be legitimate voices with different views if we're going to ever come to some solutions. Oh, and there we got a caller. So let's see if we can get our caller on the air. But Arlen, before we take the call, just go ahead and if you had a response to what I was saying there.
Well, I'm just saying that there's a lot of things I disagree with you about, but I certainly would not stop listening to you or stop reading you, or, I think a dialogue is important, and we should continue to try to, to figure things out rather than just cut each other off.
Okay, we've got a caller. Is that you, Emogi? I can't tell if it's the same number as before. I can't always remember the numbers.
Yeah, it's me.
Hey, what's going on, man? What do you have to say to us?
Well, I mean, there's all sorts of things that I'd like to say, but I think, thanks to Arlen for coming on and having this conversation as well. What I'm curious about, or would like to get y'all's sort of thoughts on is, if you remember that Lawrence O'Donnell quote from the movie An Unreasonable Man about Ralph Nader. He has a quote that is kind of popular among certain leftists who are angry at the Democratic Party, where he says, if you want to move the party to the left, you have to demonstrate to them that you're willing to not vote for them, and so it's like you're positioning yourself in an antagonist relationship for the sake of wielding leverage. And I just don't understand the perspective or the approach, the tactic of sort of immediately sort of almost swearing loyalty to the Democratic Party, and immediately just the given that, oh, I'm a Democrat, and so whatever happens, I'm sticking with these guys no matter how corrupt and evil and conservative and neoconservative they are. And so I guess it's a kind of a big topic, but like, it seems like Arlen's approach is not really sort of inspiring to people that are thinking that, what does the Democratic Party have to offer us? So I really think that there's just a stronger kind of vision and bolder approach, and kind of, I don't understand it. I'm curious, what is
So let me just jump in real quick, because I'm going to let Arlen respond. I think your question is clear, Arlen. Did you, or your point, Emogi, and thank you for it. And stay on, and then we'll get you a response to Arlen if you like. But did you understand what he was saying, Arlen?
Not entirely, but I think, one thing I got out of it was that I think we have to be open-minded and objective, and we can't just be totally loyal to one party or another. We have to look at what they're doing and, decide based on that whether we support them or not. So, I'm certainly not tied in with the Democratic Party. I think, I think they need to make a lot of changes.
I guess, and let me just add a little bit to what Emogi said there, because I don't, maybe you missed what he was saying. I don't think you're avoiding him. I understand you're saying you're not tied to the Democrats. You agree they need to make a lot of changes. But I think his concern is that you still insisted that people had to vote for, or you maybe that's not fair. If I'm mischaracterizing, my sense was that from the get-go, your position has been people have to vote for Harris, or they have to vote for Biden. And I think Emogi's saying, why? if you take that position, aren't you basically stymieing any change?
Well, of course, the reason, of course, I want people to vote for Kamala, and why I voted for Kamala was just because Donald Trump is going to be worse. And we're going to find that out, I think. I think this country is going to go through some really tough times in the next year. And we're going to find out, what's going to happen and how people will react to it. But yeah, my only reason for supporting Kamala was just because Trump was much, much worse. Is much, much worse.
Emogi, go ahead. You get last word, and then we're going to move on.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking how, and who knows what the backdoor mechanisms were that made this happen, but the fact that Trump has already announced that he's not going to hire Pompeo or Nikki Haley seems to be that it seems to be evidence that he's sort of being held accountable by the MAGA base that has a very strong and apparently principled.
Emogi, can you explain that? I get why you would say that about, and I hadn't been thinking about this at all as a positive, but I get that argument with respect to Haley, who's certainly viewed correctly, in my opinion, as a neoliberal and somewhat of a war hawk as well. How does the decision not to bring Pompeo into the government also reflect a rejection by Trump of Washington elitism, insiderism, neocon, neoliberalism?
Well, I mean, Pompeo was the head of the CIA, right?
Is that right? Is that right, Arlen? He was Trump's CIA director?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Very powerful position. I don't remember exactly what it was.
Yeah, and I think he's seen as very much a very aggressive war hawk.
I have him as former Secretary of State. So, and he was also, you're right, he was director of the CIA. You're absolutely right. And also, so he was incredibly powerful. And he was, thank you for informing us, right? I mean, I feel I should know this. So I'm glad you explained, Emogi. Yeah, he went from the CIA to state to director of to Secretary of State. Wow.
But my point in bringing that up is there's a ferocity and a sort of stubbornness and a movement culture and an antagonistic relationship with the establishment on the right that I'm not seeing on the left at all.
Yeah, thanks for that call, Emogi. Really great points, and again, educating me. I hope people don't think, "Oh my God, he's so dumb. He didn't know it was Pompeo," which I should have. So I'm sorry about that. But thanks for the information. He does make a point, though, Arlen, which is that at least on the right, and certainly with Trump, there's more of a willingness, I think, to break ranks. You see the Democrats, they all seem to coalesce, whether it's in favor of Harris or it's in favor of Biden. No one really would challenge Biden who had any influence in the party, or all joining together to vote for Hakeem Jeffries to be the House leader, even though he's a war hawk and he's very closely tied to Wall Street. Well,
when it comes to Trump, he likes to support people who are loyal to him, to support him. He's got his own reasons for why he likes people or doesn't like people, and that's just who he is. He's that kind of a leader. So we'll just have to wait and see. Now, by the way, was Pompeo even the chief of staff, possibly? I almost want to say that.
The two titles I saw, which were huge, was CIA director, and then from CIA director to Secretary of State.
Yeah, he was very powerful, and I'm kind of surprised that Trump doesn't want him in there. But when you think about it, so many people have criticized Trump, including J.D. Vance, who call him, Hitler-like, and, all kinds. Every one of these people have said terrible things about Trump, but he's willing to have them back if he feels they're loyal to him.
Okay, from Ari Magoo, because I think Ari wanted me to be looking at my chat more, and I'm going to look for ways to do that, by the way. Discuss the potential role of Tulsi in the new administration. Yeah, she might well have a high position, and certainly in the State Department, I would assume. But I don't know. I mean, I'm not part of their discussions in any way. Did she rule out? I think she was somewhat skeptical of even becoming part of the Trump. The thing is, she's very much pro-Zionist. She's very much of a Zionist. She's very pro-Israel. And so, I think she was really good on the Iraq War. She was good back in 2016, but she's become pretty hawkish. So I'm not super psyched about her being part of the Trump team at this point.
Yeah, I don't know what's going to happen with her. I haven't heard her name mentioned too much. She is kind of unusual and hard to figure out. Of course, I've heard a lot about Robert F. Kennedy, and at first it sounded like Trump wanted to give him a powerful position, but now apparently they're brushing him to the side because he's just gotten too crazy.
So wait, you're saying he's not going to be like in the Department of Health and Human Services, a secretary or some high role there?
That's what I understand, that they're pushing him aside and not going to give him the power that he would like, or that Trump originally had talked about.
Well, I can't be upset about that. I don't shed any tears for RFK Jr., and I think it would be terrible in that role. So basically what we're saying is, so far, Trump isn't making a lot of mistakes that we can identify as clearly wrong. In fact, I'm glad he called Putin. I don't think Tulsi Gabbard, who has been very, very aggressively anti-Palestine, would be a good choice to be leading state. And I don't know that she will be, or to be big there. Pompeo wasn't great. So, yeah, I'm so far not complaining, but that could easily change. We haven't, look, I mean, we don't know. Here's the final article we're going to get to. You recommended this one as well. It's All Biden's Fault by Josh Barro. Arlen, this piece kind of struck me in some ways as somewhat duplicative of Dowd's. A lot of the same criticisms as in Dowd. Was there anything in particular that jumped out at you in This Is All Biden's Fault?
Well, of course, it's not all Biden's fault, but he made some major mistakes. He should never have run in for the 2024 election. He said he wouldn't, and then he changed his mind and said he would. And people did not like him. They didn't like his age. His poll numbers were very low, and he, came across as somebody who was very old. And I think it hurt the Democrats for sure. And he took a long time before he stepped down and allowed Kamala to get up, to get and start campaigning. But it wasn't very long. She only had about, not much more than 3 months to do everything, and she never had a chance.
Yeah, I don't get that argument. I don't get that statement. She never had a chance. She was ahead in some of the polls. She was the favorite. She was the Vegas favorite. I mean, isn't ultimately her fault that she lost? I mean, maybe it was better for her not to be well known. When the more people get to know Kamala Harris, the less they seem to like her. So I don't think it's, she said this was her biggest mistake, Arlen, and a lot of people have said this, but I believe this. I'm not going to do anything differently. I can't think of anything I would do differently. People wanted change. People are not happy with where we are right now. And there are plenty of ways she could have separated herself from Biden, and she just refused to do so.
Right. That was a mistake for sure. I think her popularity kind of varied depending on how people felt about Trump. When he was, saying the crazy things that he was saying, and they thought, hey, this is an alternative. But then again, by the time people looked really at her campaign and all the negative ads and misinformation started to flow into the right-wing media, then she never really had a chance to break through and make a strong run.
Well, I guess we'll agree to disagree, as we so often do. Arlen, that's all I got. I don't know if you have any final word you want to throw in there. Otherwise, I guess we'll do. You will be available for one more Monday from the Eastern time zone, correct?
I'd have to look at the calendar, Hal, but
I believe, based on what you told me, you will not be traveling out to California until after next Monday. So presumably, we'll still be able to. That would be a week from today is the 18th of November.
Yeah, that's probably going to be the last time I'll be able to be on for a little while until I get to California. And then I'm going to be heading to Europe, around Christmas time. So I don't know what my schedule is.
Doing a lot of travel. It sounds like a lot of fun. That's great. I'm glad. All right. Yeah. Final word. Anything else you want to throw in there? And then I'm going to play the closing music and we'll call it a day.
No, I just appreciate all the nice things you say, Hal, and you did give me a good chance to give my point of view and my position. So I have no complaints. And
well, you listen tomorrow. I'm going to rip them apart. I'm going to go through everything you said, and I'm going to criticize it in great detail. No, I don't. I try very hard not to do that. Arlen, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much. Appreciate you. And I'll be back tomorrow. That'll do it for today's Halitics. Thanks, Emogi, by the way, for calling in. And thank you so much, Ari Magoo for commenting in the chat.